You go to get in your hot tub, you open the lid, maybe you put your hand in the water and it's ice cold, or it's at least not very hot. Then you look at the control panel and you realize nothing's happening. None of the buttons are doing anything. It's so frustrating because all you wanted to do was get in and soak, and now you've got to troubleshoot what's wrong. Well, in this video, I'm going to walk you through every possible scenario that could be making your hot tub act like it's not working. And we're going to talk about all the solutions and what you can do and whether or not you need to call a pro. So let's get into all of that right now. Hi, I'm Jeff Campbell from Hot Tub Owner HQ, and I'm glad you're here with me. So the very first thing I want you to do is to actually look at your hot tub's control panel and see if it's doing anything. Is it displaying an error code? Is it lighting up in any way? Does any button do anything, or is it completely dead? Even if it's not lighting up and seems dead, make sure you press every button to see if anything happens. Because there's a big difference between it not working correctly and it not getting power. And if the control panel seems completely dead, then you have a power issue, not necessarily a hot tub issue. But let's assume that the panel is totally dead and it's not doing anything no matter what you do. Now we're going to check the electrical systems, and we're going to start by checking the disconnect box, which usually is located very close to the hot tub, within say 5 or 10 feet. This is a single breaker, usually with a GFCI breaker, in other words, a little reset button in there. There's not usually anything else in the box, and it's usually about yay big. And this is typically a 50 amp breaker that just controls the power in your hot tub. So first, hit the little test and reset button and see if that does anything. You may also notice if the switch is actually kind of tripped a little bit, in other words, not fully on. In that case, flip it all the way off and then all the way back on again. But a word of caution, if it trips immediately after you flip it all the way back on, you could have a serious electrical issue, and in that case, I would call an electrician right then. But if you do flip it off and then back on again, and it seems to stay on, in other words, it doesn't trip again, then go back to your hot tub panel and see if you now have power on the panel. And it does take a minute usually for hot tub panels to kind of warm up once power has been restored. But within a minute or two, you should be able to activate the jets, set the water temperature, etc. Then see if there's any sort of error code being displayed on the panel. But let's assume you go to the disconnect box and the breaker looked just fine. The GFCI was not tripped and the breaker was fully on. Then we need to go to the main breaker panel for your house, which is often located somewhere totally different. Sometimes inside the house and sometimes on an outside wall of the house, but not usually in the same vicinity as your hot tub and your disconnect breaker. Then you'll go to that panel and you're going to look for one labeled hot tub or spa, and usually this is also a 50 amp breaker. And again, look to see if that has been tripped or is partially open. In other words, it tripped off, it's not fully closed, but it's also not fully open. And then again, if it is, flip it off and then all the way back on again. And again, if it immediately trips again, call an electrician. But if it doesn't and it stays on, then go back to your disconnect box, make sure that is still on, then go to your hot tub control panel and again, look for signs of life. Now, some of you might have an inflatable hot tub or a plug and play hot tub. In other words, the kind of hot tub that just plugs into a normal wall outlet. Those are almost always GFCI outlets. So again, press that little reset switch on the outlet and see if that turns the power back on again. And if it doesn't, then look at your house's main breaker panel and check the breaker that powers that outlet. I will also say, and this is going to gross some of you out, that sometimes rodents are drawn to the inside of a hot tub. And you might open the front panel and look for any signs of chewed wires. I will say that if chewed wires are your issue, though, your GFCI breaker and maybe even your main breaker will have both tripped off. And if you've got an issue where rodents have chewed through wires, you've got two different issues you've got to deal with. One, I would call an electrician and have them come out and fix the chewed wires, but you also need to deal with the rodent issue, in which case you may want to call a pest control company or at least put out some glue traps or some sort of humane catch and release trap and get rid of the rodents that might be living under your hot tub. Okay, now let's assume you've tried everything I've just talked about and nothing has had any impact. The next thing I want you to do is remove the front panel from your hot tub and look at your control pack. That is the big box that basically controls everything. The pump connects to that. The heater tube is usually part of that assembly. And then your top side panel, your control panel, plugs into that as well. And many of these, but not all, but many of these will have a small little red reset button somewhere on the outside of the box, similar to the red reset button you might see on the bottom of a disposal at your kitchen sink. If yours has one of those, I want you to press it the same as you would on a disposal, and then again, see if that restores power to it. Now, a word of caution, I do want you to do this while the power is on, because that's the best way to know if it's been tripped and if pressing it restores power. But you are dealing with a lot of power down here, so do not open the front panel of your control pack and don't touch any wires. Simply look for that small red reset button on the outside and press it. Now, in the case of all of these things, if something is tripping your GFCI breaker, your main breaker panel, or the red reset button on your control pack, that's telling you that there's a problem somewhere in your system. It could be electrical, or it could be tied to your hot tub, and at this point, we're not quite sure yet. But now let's talk about some of the issues that could be tripping these breakers. The first is water level. Hot tubs automatically lose water to evaporation, and especially when it's hot like it is right now in Central Texas here, it might lose as much as an inch or two a week. So check your hot tub's level, make sure it's above every jet, make sure it's above the line where the water goes into the filter compartment. You don't want your hot tub to be trying to get water and have it not be able to because the water level is too low. So if you notice your water level is low, please top off your hot tub right now and then reset anything that needs to be reset and see if that fixes the issue. Another thing that can cause this kind of issue are clogged filters. The filters basically are designed to catch all of the debris, leaves, hair, flaked off skin, lotions, body oils, things of that nature. All of that goes into your hot tub's water eventually gets trapped in the filter. And over time, if you don't clean your filters on a regular basis, they can become clogged. If they become clogged, they can prevent water from flowing through the heater tube. And in most cases, they won't be completely clogged, but even a slight reduction can mean that there's not enough water flowing through the heater tube for the amount of heat being generated. And the high limit switch, which is kind of a safety mechanism, will trip and turn power off to prevent it from overheating. I clean my filters about every 3 weeks at my kitchen sink with a sprayer. I just rinse them off. I get in between every paper pleat and then I put them back in. And then every 3 months or so, I do a deep chemical soak of my filters with a cleaning product. If you want to know every step of the way on both of those procedures, check out this video of mine right up here. But if you don't remember the last time you cleaned your filters, I would absolutely start with that. Take them out right now. Give them a good rinse at your kitchen sink. If they look really discolored, really clogged, there's a lot of calcium debris that's stuck on the paper pleats that doesn't easily come off, I would probably recommend getting brand new filters and seeing if that doesn't fix the issue. Generally speaking, if you're really on top of your filter maintenance, you can go about 2 years before you need to buy new filters. But if you're not really on top of it, I would replace them once a year. And if you have no idea when or if the last time your filters were replaced, it's probably time for new ones. Another common scenario that can cause this sort of issue are flow issues, usually after a water change. After a water change, it's not uncommon to have a problem called an airlock, where it's essentially an air bubble gets inside of the plumbing. Remember, you drained all your water out, then you filled it back up again, and there's an air bubble somewhere in the line that is preventing water from flowing through normally. There are 2 ways to fix this issue, and I talk about both in a recent video, so check that out right up here. But that could easily cause, again, your high limit switch to trip because not enough water is flowing through your heater tube and it shuts off to prevent overheating. All right, so for 99.9% of you, everything I've just covered should absolutely fix your issue. But let's assume that you do get power restored to your panel, but you're getting some error codes and you don't know what to do with that. What I would do in that case is actually Google your hot tub's make and model and look for the manual. In many cases, the hot tubs are already here when we buy the house and we have no idea where a paper manual might be. But it's usually easy to find these things online if you simply Google it. I'm lucky in that I have a panel right down here on the bottom corner that tells me my make, model, and serial number of my Master Spa's hot tub. And it's easy for me to Google that manual. Good idea to save it once you find it too. Bookmark that site. But then in that manual, there will be a complete list of all the error codes, what they mean, and how to fix it. The other thing I would definitely do is I would remove the front panel and see if you smell any sort of electrical smell. Burned wires, melted plastic, that sort of smell. If you smell anything like that, cut the power off and call an electrician. Now, some other possibilities that I haven't covered thus far, it could be that the heater tube itself has failed. There's a heating element inside of that tube, and they do sometimes fail. So it could be that the heating element inside of your heater tube has failed and simply needs to be replaced. And again, it probably tripped that high limit switch. Those are cheap and easy to replace. Obviously, make sure you cut the power off before you do any sort of work like that. And if you've got gate valves on your hot tub, these are kind of little plunger looking devices, usually located on either side of the control pack. If you can close those off, that means you don't even have to drain the hot tub to remove the heater tube and change out that heating element. Another thing that could cause this, though, is a defective pump. If the pump can't push water through the hot tub's plumbing system, then it won't be able to push water through the heater tube. And again, you get that high limit switch tripping. And the easiest way to know if it's the pump is you probably won't lose power completely on your topside panel, but when you press the buttons for the jets, you either get a clicking noise or nothing at all.